Welcome all. You're listening to the MLTI 2.0 podcast, Teaching with Tech.
We are your hosts, MLTI Ambassadors.
We are here to support Maine educators by building a network focused on authentic voices, experiences, and technology integration.
Welcome to the initial episode of the MLTI 2.0 podcast. Our goal with this podcast series is to be able to provide some professional development for educators around technology usage, as well as connect Maine educators to each other to help expand resources and build a network. Each month, we will have a different theme where we will release 2 podcasts discussing that theme. Additionally, for each episode, we want to highlight educators from around the state who can provide authentic experiences incorporating that month's theme into their classroom. We are in January of 2023 right now. Happy New Year to all. And this month, we will have our podcast centered around gamification and how it looks in the classroom. We will be able to dig into the different components to it, discuss examples of it in the classroom, as well as what pitfalls to be aware of when implementing it. Additionally, we will have some authentic voices from the field by hearing from a couple of 5th grade teachers at Brewer Community School who will explain their usage of gamification in their classroom. Let's get after it. For this episode, I will be your host, MLTI Ambassador Rob Dominick, and I am joined by fellow ambassadors, Nicole Karod.
Hey Rob, how are you today?
Doing great, Nicole. Happy to have you here. And Ambassador Joshua Schmidt.
Hi, Rob.
Hey, Josh. Thanks for joining us. So, right before we started recording this episode, we were talking together, and I noticed that Nicole had her Dunk's coffee with her. I know that, even in the winter, I still enjoy a nice coffee as well. But Nicole, you've got a little bit of a story here with your coffee that fits perfectly into our gamifying theme.
Yeah, my Dunkin' coffee was free today.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great way to start the day.
You get points each time you visit, so today's coffee was free. There's so many things like this that I buy into, whether it's food apps, credit card points, or even my watch counts my steps. In fact, if it's not on, I will often say that it doesn't even count. Gamification is all around us. What does that even mean?
So one of the biggest misconceptions I hear from educators when talking about gamification is that they think it has to be an actual game. So Nicole's examples are perfect at showing just how common gamification is already outside of a classroom. And none of those examples, whether it's free coffee, free airline miles, or even step counting, are actual games. They're just making those activities feel more game-like, even if the actual structure isn't a game at all. In the school setting, it can be exactly the same way. So, Rob, what are some ways that you've seen gamification in the classroom, whether it was in a game structure or without a game structure?
Yeah, I think that's a great question there because, as you said, games are all around us in our real life, as Nicole pointed out, and they are a great motivator in the classroom or in the school setting as well, if we can implement them, in an efficient way. Notably, off the top of my head, I know that I've seen, like classroom currency or points given for students to help with this classroom management aspect, which can really go a long way and help motivation. I know there are schools, I'm thinking of specifically of Brewer, where they have this Way to Be sticker program where it's kind of a gamification for the entire school where they can earn stickers as students for getting caught, doing the right things throughout the school, whether it's, simple as raising your hand in the classroom or staying on task, or whether it's in the hallways and you're being respectful and kind. And it goes along with the school goals as students want to be able to follow the guiding principles of being caring, being kind, being a collaborative learner, being a cooperative learner, those types of things that they have. And again, you see those kids with the stickers when they leave school and they got stickers, and I'll ask any single one of them, even if I don't know them, like, oh, awesome job, you got a sticker today, it kind of builds that gamifying aspect for the entire district. So, Nicole, what do you see for examples?
So, Rob, I think you bring up a lot of really great points with engagement and motivation. Doesn't matter what kid you see in the hallway, they're excited about those stickers. And that's exactly what I see in my classroom. I use a game. It's a game called The Amazing Race, and my students actually race around the school to find different clues, and they have different quests and points and things like that, and it's kind of all in, but the engagement is just incredible. So that piece is so important. I do think there are pieces within that you have to just be a little bit careful of as far as competition. And I think, Josh, you have some examples and thoughts around that.
Yeah, I think I loved when Rob had talked about like kids getting caught doing the right thing, which really points out the purpose of gamification is that you're trying to incentivize the behaviors we want our kids to do more of. So you can give them points for being a good teammate, or you can give them points for being, hardworking or challenging themselves. But when I started doing gamification in the classroom, I realized that there was always a winner. And if there's a winner, there's always a loser. And all of a sudden, that competition aspect that was such a benefit became a huge problem for some of my learners. So there's a few different structures you can use that can kind of balance out that competition problem. So obviously you can always start with learner versus learner. There's a point, there's a high score, there's a leaderboard, there's a winner, there's a loser. That can work really well as long as you're really cognizant of the strengths and weaknesses of that structure. However, one that I really like is having like the class as an entire team working together to try to reach some common goal. So if you're playing a game where you're trying to get a high score, instead of having each student have a high score that goes on a leaderboard, take all of the scores of the class together, put them into one pot, and see if they can reach a cumulative score, and then everyone in the class gets some type of currency or prize or badge. Now, the golden ticket, the one that I always try to get to, is student versus self, where instead of a high score compared with another student or a high score compared with the entire class, the idea is the students like achieving that game or that activity throughout the week or throughout the month, and they're comparing it back to themselves so that they can look at their progress, they can look at how they improved, maybe they can write about their strategy or the things that they did to improve over time or the mindset shift that happened. And if you kind of balance out those different types of competition, you can kind of avoid that fierce feeling of we're always competing against each other, and sometimes we're on the same team or sometimes we're just competing with ourselves only. What do you think about that, Rob?
Yeah, no, I think those are some excellent points. And I'm just thinking in the back of my mind as you're talking there, from my math background perspective, being a middle school and high school math teacher in my time as an educator, it makes a lot of sense because I can tell you playing math games can be often quite difficult because students think that it's all about speed. Any game that's relating to speed, they get discouraged about in math, and that's a big perception and a stigma that has been changing in the math education lately is getting rid of that idea that you have to be fast in order to be good at math. So I just know there's many examples where in my classroom, if we're playing a game, if the student doesn't feel confident already, which a lot of them don't coming into math class, they're not going to engage in that game and it's not going to be effective anymore because they don't think they can do well. They're not going to be as fast as that one smart kid in the classroom that, they always perceive as the one who's going to win it all. So I think if you can change that perspective and have it be more of, student versus self, where they're just trying to make themselves better, or if you can make it a productive team aspect, not just have that one kid that does the problems for the entire team and the other ones just disconnect and check out. I think that goes a long way, and that's where the true growth and improvement comes, is when the student can just compete against themselves. So structuring your games ultimately that way would be an awesome sweet spot to that. Well, Nicole, how do you see all that fitting in your experience?
Yeah, I think, you have to be aware of your learners. So when you think about, the different types of kids, you're going to have that kid that, raises their hand every single time and they are that quick in math class. But you're also going to have kind of the introverts that aren't willing to raise their hand. So how do you provide, a balance of activities and finding that competition within or against yourself is going to be huge. But even just your activities, like I think about using escape rooms, and when you have a variety of puzzles for an activity, you might have one kid that's just going to kind of pull that puzzle aside and be like, I'm going to do this one quietly over here. And then they can be the rock star of it and they're going to buy into it versus having to always be that big verbal, huge kind of thing that you might think gamification is.
Well, and I think Rob brought up too the idea that if you put the kids in a team together and, you're playing maybe a Jeopardy review game, something like that. If you're a student who's not confident, you don't want to take that risk and ruin the high score for your team that's there. However, if the concept is the entire room is on the same team, everyone's competing together, all of a sudden that mindset's going to be really different because now it's not about how many points do I get compared to everyone in the room. It's can I get as many points as I can achieve as possible? And then if you're, once again, that student versus self, like yesterday I got 900, could I get to 1,000 today? And it's really not about the points or the game or any of that. It's trying to help kids understand that it's about that growth mindset and that improvement, over time.
Yeah, I think that those are excellent points. And I'm just, again, as you're talking, I'm thinking to my own self, like, as Nicole said, the authentic experiences in real life of gamifying, like, I'm never going to beat anybody in a race. I'm not fleet of foot, but if I've got my tracker and my pace, and I want to improve my own running, I'm going to be going against myself, and that's going to be my goal. And whatever level I get, I'm going to try to beat it next time. But that's that internal motivation. And that's the ultimate goal there eventually. The other aspect of gamifying that I wanted to ask you about that I notice is how there's different levels to the gamification. There's different categories of you can have it specific for just a lesson to help break up your monotony potentially of your classroom, or you could have it throughout an entire unit. Where it spans the entire content for a unit that you're working on. Or, as we mentioned, in some cases, it might be school-wide with like PBIS initiatives and things like that. Do you have any comments or experience about changing the gamifying and being real specific to just lessons, breaking things up, or units? What have you done with that?
So I can jump in here. One of the things that I did when I moved from South Dakota to Maine is that China had a really cool program that was a PBIS structure where kids earned Clipper tickets for positive behaviors. And rather than take my classroom currency, which was completely separated, I realized that I could incorporate that positive behavior structure from within the school into that classroom currency already. And I don't think it's necessarily about an exact strategy or an exact thing that fits within, but the idea of taking an understanding of the structure that already exists within your school or your classroom or your team and thinking like, how can I incorporate this gamification to really get those behaviors that I'm trying to get more of? Like I said earlier about how can I create like a point system that gets more teamwork? Or how can I increase badges that get students to challenge themselves a little bit more? Or how can we have, these points that turn into classroom currency that happen from these positive behaviors like Rob had talked about, getting caught doing the right thing. And I think gamification is always going to be most effective when it can be incorporated into the structure that already exists.
Excellent points again, Josh. Like, it doesn't have to be some grand concept that takes you, all kinds of planning time, and teachers' time is already valuable enough. It can work within the construct of the classroom already and the environment and the atmosphere that's already been established. That is great. So if listeners here would like to dig in a little more about the comparisons of gamification and game-based learning, as well as some other basics of the background of it, Josh has created some PD videos, which are posted on the MLTI YouTube channel. In addition, there are a few other ones made from other ambassadors in previous years. So if you want to dig deeper into that, please check out that YouTube channel. You can find the link in the show notes. For now, we're going to jump over and get an authentic view from teachers in the field, and we will hear from Brewer Community School 5th grade teachers Katie Miller and Sam Nichols about their use of gamification. So I'm here at Brewer Community School with 5th grade teachers Katie Miller and Sam Nichols. They're going to be speaking about gamification and how they're able to incorporate it in their classroom and what they see as the benefits to it. So first then, Sam, can you just talk about how you're using gamification in your classroom? How do you integrate it, whether it be in a lesson or a unit or, beginning class, end of class, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I use it predominantly as a reward for when students do their work in a good amount of time, and it has to be quality work, and that's actually one of the drawbacks that I've found is when I offer the carrot out, the kids will want to do their work maybe a little fast and kind of sloppy to get to the games at the end, but especially with math facts or equivalent fractions this year, I just use it like Blooket for those really repetitive practice sessions, and it's great because they click on they're just doing math and they will click on the answer and they'll maybe get like a little power up and they get so competitive about it and they'll just be like, well, I want to win, I want to be at the top, I'm gonna do better than you. So especially with my really competitive boys, they just eat it up.
Nice, that's great. Yeah, that's a great way to break up the monotony of math facts at times, where it's important for them to get those math facts down, but skill and drill can sometimes just bore them to death. So that's a great balance. Katie, how about you? How do you look to incorporate it?
I think we use games a lot in the classroom. Sam and I, we teach science. It's kind of the same units, and so when we kind of prepped kids with study guides and stuff, instead of just handing them a study guide and flashcards, we were able to take some things we had already made, take like Quizlet or vocab practice, and then turn those into Blookets without really doing a lot of extra work. And so we posted Blookets and Kahoot. And then there were some Legends of Learning games that were directly linked to the target that we were kind of working on. And so we posted those on Google Classroom as just kind of a different way for kids to kind of study at home. When we were preparing for like a science test like that and kids need to study, I think Sam made like a Jeopardy that we used to practice with kids in the classroom before, just to kind of review and for them to get an idea, what questions might look like on a test. I use games a lot in math as well. I teach math, and we were just recently doing a lot of decimal operations, and they need so much repetition to get, long division and to get decimal division down that, it can get boring in class having to work out of a workbook kind of every day. And so sometimes, I'll go to a Kahoot or something that somebody's made and do some practice there, but a lot of times I'll just turn like our bookwork or our worksheet into like a game. As fifth grade teachers that, we do those award assemblies and stuff at the end, and, kids are awarded for academics, and we've seen an issue in the past with, girls getting kind of all those awards because they're so motivated to please their teachers and they want to do well, and boys just they're not motivated always by the same things, and not to get into gender roles or any of those kind of things, but boys like competition. And so if we can turn a monotonous lesson on decimals into a game for a piece of candy or a potato, and that's what motivates them,
that's great.
Then that's something that we just try to do.
I love the fact you just pointed out too, that it could just be throwing a piece of paper in a trash can, right? And you just get the opportunity to shoot something like that instead of a big formal game. Like, it doesn't have to be, too in depth or too ornate that you build it to be. It can be something simple like that. And they get up and moving, and then they can let themselves loose a little bit, right? But you can still have the learning be the center of it.
And there's like all those, like I use some of those like random name generators where I just have the list like already prepped, and I just spin it, and whoever's name it is, they get to do something, and it's like, oh my god, or a sticker. Yeah, for fifth graders.
Especially for fifth graders, right?
That's
Yes.
enough to motivate a kid to hustle a little bit more on a math problem, or, hey, I need to make sure I do my math. So sometimes it's not always about getting the correct answer. Like in math, I want them to estimate, I want them to do a multiplication check, but a lot of kids, like you were saying, just want to rush through and get it done, and they don't care if it's right. But, if they know that they might have to say the answer in front of their peers in a game, or they might get a prize for doing a math check, then sometimes that's just enough to get this stuff done.
So I feel like you've kind of touched on it, both of you already, about the benefits that come from it. The competition and the interaction piece. Is just anything else you want to touch on about the benefits that you see? That obviously the real reasons why you do it are those pieces to it. Anything else besides the competition and shaking things up and getting them engaged in a different way that come to mind?
As you asked me that question, I just saw a little piece of a game that we played earlier this week, and it was just a scoot. So I just put different problems around the classroom, and it was like a little hide and seek kind of thing. Because I'm really mean when I put these when I hide these things. So it's just another way to have the kids be like interested and want to go to the next problem, and especially with those kids who are who maybe take their time. With problems, they're just a little more motivated to say, okay, well, I want to find the next problem.
Yeah, that's really cool, actually.
It was really helpful for me.
Hide the things around the room. Yeah, they're hunting to solve math problems. That's great.
Yeah, it doesn't even look different than a normal math problem either. It's just...
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. All right.
Well, and so like, obviously we can do review and all that kind of stuff, but like I teach a math workshop, and kids kind of have some choice of whether they're going to get some problems done using technology or using a game and stuff. And I think just having that extra option for a kid, if they need to review stuff socially, or they know they need a peer to help them, right? If they might need somebody who's an expert on whatever we're doing in math, and they might feel more confident just doing it as a game, where they can ask somebody a question versus going on a computer and just kind of doing IXL. You get the kind of that peer learning and that peer review too when you're working together and working in games too, which I think is important.
Very true. That's a great point. Okay, then. So obviously, though, in the realities of the classroom, there's got to be some challenges to it that come to mind that when you're planning it, or making groups or whatever your game's going to be. Just it doesn't have to be everything. Just a couple things top of your list that you would say for other teachers to keep in mind if they're going to be planning some sort of gamifying in their classroom.
I definitely think the rushing through is maybe the number one. But besides that, I have some students that maybe are not as don't show as much sportsmanship as others, and that can be kind of irritating to the students who don't know the material as well, because a lot of the time I'll hear, oh, this is easy, and I know that I have students who struggle with some of these problems. So sort of controlling our how we communicate in the classroom, those social skills especially, and having sportsmanship has definitely been a struggle in the past, or times where we have teamwork. Like for our Jeopardy game, I'll let the kids be in groups of like 3 or 4, and one kid will think they know the answer, and then they will be just relentless with it, and then they'll have 3 other kids being like, no, I think it's off the study guide, it might be this one. And it can be when a kid is just having a bad day, and games can be really good, but when a kid is having a bad day, it can really detract from the experience.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that's what games are really good for, is teaching kids those social and emotional lessons that come with building conflict that they're going to have in a game, or building for frustration, and sometimes that's essentially the point of the game that I'm playing. Like if we do like an escape room or something, and kids get struck, stuck, as long as they're, in that productive struggle, and to kind of let them work through it and use their resources that they have, or use their notes, or use whatever they have. I think that's also really important skills that we're reinforcing by playing games and getting them to kind of do that kind of learning too. But I do think technology is often the biggest struggle you have. It's exciting to try to find games that are going to work for your class, but then you get down to the lesson and the internet isn't working, or Kahoot and Blookett's been down quite a few times as well, and that can be frustrating when you do the work to make something and then it just doesn't work, which I guess is a good lesson for them and a good lesson for us too. That sometimes stuff just doesn't work out and we have to kind of pivot.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thank you guys for your time today. We certainly appreciate it. I think it's a lot of great information for other teachers out there.
Well, I want to thank Katie and Sam for agreeing to come on the show. We really love and appreciate having teachers from the field be able to contribute to our conversation. We are looking forward to hearing more from other educators in future episodes. As we wrap up today's conversation around gamification, let's just sum up by offering one piece of advice for using gamification. So, Nicole, if teachers are looking to implement this into their classrooms, what is one piece of advice that you would have for them?
I would say that they have to make it their own. So if you're the type of person that wants to go all in and you want to gamify everything, more power to you. But if you're the type of teacher that just wants just a little element of this, maybe you just want to do, levels for your different content. Start small if that's what you need to do. So make it work for you. Josh, what's your advice?
I think that's great, Nicole. When I think about implementing gamification, I think about when I started at the very beginning and what was the thing that I wish I would have known then. And I focused a little bit too much early on just creating the coolest thing I possibly could, the cool activity or the fun thing. But now when I think about gamifying my classroom, I think about what behavior or attitudes do I want to get more of in my classroom. So if I want more teamwork, if I want more critical thinking, I want more discussion, I want students to challenge themselves a little bit more, I focus on those things first, and then I create the gamification structures to try to get more of that behavior. Because what I've discovered is the actual game or structure or reward doesn't matter nearly as much as the kids that you have in your classroom. It's going to change each year. It's going to change with each class. But as long as you're really focusing on those things you want your kids to do more of, then the gamification structure is always going to be more successful.
All right, great advice from you two. Thank you for that. Much appreciated. I think those are great points for everyone to keep in mind as they're going to try implementing gamification in their own classroom. For everyone else, our next episode will feature a deeper dive into the tools, resources, and strategies to make gamification work in your school. So if you're looking to get a little bit deeper into it, if this has piqued your interest from this initial episode, make sure to watch out for that coming later in January. Well, that is it for our first episode here on the MLTI 2.0 podcast, Teaching with Tech. We hope you gained some insight into gamification in the classroom and will join us on the next episode where we will get into those aforementioned specifics. Again, I would really like to thank those educators who joined us today, Brewer teachers Sam Nichols and Katie Miller. We also want to give a reminder that this podcast is produced by the MLTI team at the Maine Department of Education. If you would like to reach out to us, you can do so via our email at doe-mlti2.0@maine.gov. In fact, keep that email handy, as after our next episode, there will be a giveaway opportunity where you will be able to win a pretty sweet prize for your classroom. For my fellow ambassadors, Joshua Schmidt and Nicole Karod, I am Rob Dominick. We thank you for listening. Remember, all of those teachers out there, it's okay to fall apart sometimes. Tacos fall apart, and we still love them. Class dismissed.